Chapter 7: The Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery. For years, I tried quitting opioids and was never able to finally free myself from the chains of addiction. It was only when I accidentally used the Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery that I was able to recover and then transcend addiction. Remember when I said addiction is a psychosocial spiritual disorder? For years, I was just focused on getting some Valium or other benzos, along with using Imodium AD, to get through the acute opioid withdrawal stage, which is all I really knew. I didn't know I needed to repair my brain with natural therapies to get through the second stage of quitting, called Postacute Withdrawal Syndrome, PAWS. I also didn't know I needed to work on my psychology and mindset, my social domain of recovery, my home situation, my physical environment, and my spirituality. Thus, the main reason I wasn't able to quit opioids, despite years of trying, was because I wasn't using the Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery. This is the same reason traditional treatment approaches like inpatient, outpatient, 12-step, sober living, etc. have very low success rates. Some of these approaches cover one or two of the domains of recovery, such as psychological and social. Some of them even hit on three of the domains, psychosocial, spiritual. And of course, they all leave out the biological pillar, which is the most important. Here is a short recap of how I unwittingly used the Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery to finally free myself from opioids 10 years ago. Step 1. I created a detox plan and went through with it. I used 40 milligrams of methadone every morning for 7 days to prevent acute withdrawal symptoms. Next, I used high-dosage Valium several times a day for a week, and every week dropped my dosage by half until I finally transitioned off Valium without withdrawal symptoms after 4 weeks. Step 2. A family member knew I was quitting opioids and benzos and sent me 2 supplements they said would help a lot. I didn't know what the ingredients would do, but I took them in the way my family member suggested. They worked great. Within a few days, my mood, energy, appetite, and sleep all improved significantly. How awesome! Now that I'm a specialist in supplementation for opioid and other drug recovery, I realize why the supplements helped me this much. One of the supplements was a combination of amino acids, herbs, and other nutrients that helped my brain create dopamine and endorphins and enkephalins naturally, which were neurotransmitters I was severely deficient in due to long-term daily opioid use. The second supplement was a combination of herbs and other nutrients that helped my brain create GABA and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, naturally. GABA helped to calm down anxiety and relax me, and the BDNF helped me literally grow new brain cells. BDNF is like Miracle-Gro for the brain. These supplements were the biggest reason I was able to make such an easy recovery. After quitting opioids numerous times in the past, I would always be strongly affected by post-acute withdrawal syndrome, PAWS. PAWS is a set of symptoms that occur after the acute withdrawal. The longest I had been clean off opioids in the past was 3 or 4 months, and for that whole duration I suffered from the following symptoms: depression, anxiety, insomnia, anhedonia, the inability to feel pleasure, extreme fatigue, aching muscles. However, this time around, I quickly became physically and mentally healthy as a result of taking the correct supplements for coming off opioids and benzos. Additionally, my mom was cooking me nutritious meals that were whole food and organic based with high-quality proteins, carbs, fats, and fiber, rich in micronutrients like antioxidants and phytochemicals and more. Soon, I also got back into exercise. I started off going for long walks. Then, when the supplements and nutrition began making me feel much better, I got back into surfing, lifting weights, jogging, stretching, and swimming. Thus, now I was taking such a great array of nutrients to kickstart my brain's process of creating the neurochemicals I was needing to feel good without opioids and benzos, Eating healthily and exercising regularly, I was unknowingly addressing and supporting the foundational biological treatment component. Since my mood, outlook, health, and energy all were doing so much better, I didn't feel the need or even desire to use opioids or other substances. I had quickly solved the main root problem, which was in my brain. Additionally, I unwittingly optimized the environment pillar of recovery as I was living at my parents' home and had my own bedroom. My parents are daily meditators and very health-oriented, and so living at a safe, drug and alcohol-free home with my own bedroom and all of the family support, connection, and accountability was a huge piece to my personal detox and early recovery puzzle. With the biochemical and environmental pillars doing well, I just needed to address the psychosocial, spiritual realms, and I'd be recovering holistically using the hierarchy of opioid recovery. Step 3. 5 weeks after quitting opioids, I read a book that radically altered the course of my life. What I find extraordinary is how the book ended up in my life. I was sitting next to my younger brother during our family's Christmas party, and he was opening up a present that our cousin gifted him. He tore off the final piece of wrapping paper and held up a book that was titled The Game: Penetrating the Secret Society of Pickup Artists by Neil Strauss. I laughed because it was a book on how to pick up women, and I thought it was a pretty funny Christmas present. However, I found myself curiously attracted to what lay inside. So I asked my brother if I could browse through it. He handed it to me. I read the first page, and I was so compelled by what I read that I asked to borrow it for a day or two. I finished reading it in less than 2 days, and my mind was completely blown. However, it wasn't because of the strategies I learned on the art of picking up women. Instead, I was amazed at the transformation the author of the book went through during the 2 years he studied the art of pickup. He changed his image, started working out, began going to personal development seminars, read a ton of self-help books, and learned how to use something called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. I was so fascinated with his personal growth that I decided to copy what he had done. So I began purchasing the books he recommended for self-improvement. The first book I read was called Introducing NLP: Psychological Skills for Understanding and Influencing People. And once again, my mind was blown. Learning NLP was like having an owner's manual for the brain. My whole outlook on life changed. My personal growth skyrocketed into the 4th dimension. Next, I read Unlimited Power: The New Science of Personal Achievement, a book by the self-help guru Tony Robbins, and I conditioned a whole new mindset. I was a completely different person after reading Unlimited Power. Instead of being fearful, lazy, and self-conscious, I was now confident, happy, focused, motivated, and passionate about creating the life of my dreams. Finally, I began meditating, journaling, praying, and this entire several weeks off opioids, I wasn't in contact with people that used drugs. I was deep into enhancing my mindset with books and going to school. I was becoming more and more spiritual, and I was only spending time with family, friends, and classmates that were drug-free and a very positive influence on me. With almost no time after detoxing from opioids, my physical, psychological, environmental, spiritual, and social health were at an all-time high, and I was loving the person I was becoming. I was addressing and treating all of the pillars of recovery in numerous ways that were synergistic and highly effective for me personally. The hierarchy of opioid recovery. You don't need to do exactly what I did to use the hierarchy of opioid recovery. In fact, you and every other person should create your own highly individualized hierarchy of opioid recovery treatment plan. You can customize your own treatment plan, which you'll learn the step-by-step process of how to do in Chapter 11. Thus, think of this chapter as the overview on the hierarchy, and then when we come to Chapter 11, we can get right into the detailed superstructure of how this system works and how to work it for yourself, too. In the meantime, here's what you need to know. This model of addiction recovery is loosely based on Maslow's hierarchy of needs and mostly based on the bio-psychosocial spiritual model that people like Julia Ross, Christina Veselock, the late Joan Matthews Larson, Carolyn Rubin, and others have taught for decades. I also learned about this framework for addiction treatment at Mueller College, a trade school I attended for a year to become a certified substance abuse counselor. I chose Mueller as the school I wanted to go to because they incorporated the holistic aspect of addiction and recovery in their curriculum, and it resonated deeply with me. As I wrote in the introduction of this book, mainstream ideas, education, and culture never seemed like a good fit for me. I wanted to fit in, but no matter how hard I tried, it was like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. I dropped out of community college 3 times over the span of 6 years and was never able to make it long enough to transfer to a 4-year college. The main reason was none of the majors or class topics in general excited me enough. I really liked music and psychology, but other than that, I could care less about any other areas of major. And I was nowhere near passionate enough about a music major or psychology major to do the required work for such a long-term goal. Thus, when I looked through the Mueller College course catalog and read the section on alcohol and drug counseling certification word by word, I finally knew what I wanted to do for a career. It was a holistic addiction counseling program, and I immediately decided I would have the passion necessary to complete every requirement for the school and internship, passing the final exam, etc. It was at Mueller College that I learned about complementary and integrative therapies for addiction such as NLP, Qigong, hypnosis, meditation, nature therapy, equine therapy, Native American sweat lodge therapy, exercise therapy, nutritional therapies, and other alternative therapies. This provided a good foundation to build upon after my school ended, and for the past decade I've been working with the bio-psychosocial spiritual model of recovery, which the hierarchy of opioid recovery is based on, although it differs somewhat to the typical framework. Now, let's get into the structure of this hierarchy. First, imagine a pyramid for a moment. This is the mental framework we're going to use in this book to explain the hierarchy of recovery. At the base of the pyramid is the foundation of treatment, the biological, aka physical or biochemical, aspect of addiction and recovery. No matter who the person is, what drug they're addicted to, etc., this should always be the foundation of any treatment plan. Why? Because opioids, alcohol, and other drugs create or exacerbate biochemical imbalances. These imbalances then lead to symptoms such as drug cravings, anxiety, depression, fatigue, insomnia, and much more. Since drugs are physical substances that cause negative physical changes to a physical organ, the brain, the base of any holistic treatment plan needs to be targeted at restoring the brain to an optimal state, using natural therapies such as supplementation, diet, and exercise. There are dozens of other powerful natural therapies too, and you'll learn about the best ones for opioid recovery in detail in Chapter 11. Directly above the physical component in the hierarchy, we come to the psychological aspect of addiction and recovery. This is your mindset, your view of the world, your attitude, your thought processes, beliefs, values, identity, character, personality, and so much more. Most treatment approaches in the mainstream leave out the biochemical repair foundation and just focus on 1, 2, or 3 of the other components of the hierarchy, psychosocial, spiritual. But now that you're aware of how important the biochemical foundation is, you can easily understand why, if your brain is still compromised from opioid or other drug use, these additional therapies can only have moderate success at best. Moving up the hierarchy is the social aspect of addiction and recovery. This domain involves your relationships. Whenever I tried to quit alcohol in my 20s, I always relapsed because I continued to hang out with my friends that were regular drinkers. The social element of addiction and recovery is very important. Who you hang out with and how healthy your social support system is plays a big role in whether or not you can quit and stay quit for good. Ascending to the next pillar above social is environmental. This refers to the physical environment you live in. It begins with your bedroom, then spreads out to your home, and spreads out further to the community you live in. When I was living by the beach on my own or with roommates during my addiction, it was a very difficult place to recover in. There are tons of bars and drugs and liquor stores all over that town. And when I lived in Norwich, New York, I knew way too many people that used and sold opioids to avoid it successfully. For me personally, I needed to move back in with my parents to heal from addiction, and they also lived up the hill in the nicer area of Ocean Beach. This put some distance between myself and all the bars and young people and drugs, etc. As an empath, being far enough away from the madness helped a lot because whilst I was living in the environment of the madness, I absorbed those energies. Up the hill in the nice area of town with families and children versus young drinkers and drug users and bars, I was finally able to achieve and maintain a more grounded energy. That grounded energy was key for my personal recovery puzzle. Finally, at the top of the hierarchy is the spiritual aspect of addiction and recovery. You don't have to believe in God or some type of force of the universe even. The spiritual aspect involves your growth as a human being, finding and living into your purpose, and contribution to the lives of others. Many people dive deeper into their religion when they create and implement their recovery treatment plan. Additionally, many people that aren't religious but do believe in the concept of a God or force of the universe get deeper into spirituality and perhaps meditation, even though they're not part of any organized religion. And some people even call nature their higher power and believe there's a powerful orchestrator and that life on Earth was not simply one big accident and that there is a purpose for all of this. Spirituality, consciousness, metaphysics, soul evolution, and cosmic plan are some of my absolute favorite topics in life, and the older I get, the more I enjoy thinking about these concepts. Missing links. Based on your personal recovery puzzle, you'll need to do some serious contemplation and brainstorming to figure out your own missing links. For example, in your past attempts at opioid detox and recovery, start thinking about what some of your missing components were now that you've learned about the hierarchy. Each person will have missing links, but depending on the person and situation, these will differ. For example, I've had many clients over the years that had wonderful lives, where they were wealthy and loved what they did for a living, had beautiful and healthy families, no major traumas or mental health disorders or anything else like that. In these situations, they really just needed an effective and customized opioid detox plan to get through the acute and post-acute withdrawal. However, beyond this, they didn't need to find and fill in missing links in their environmental, psychological, social, or spiritual pillars of recovery. For another example, the more typical client I work with has several missing links. In addition to needing a detox plan, many of the people I work with have unresolved trauma, chronic pain, and either an anxiety disorder or the high sensitivity and/or empath trait they haven't learned to optimize their life for having. We will go deeper into missing links and how to find your own and add customized therapies to your Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery treatment plan in Chapter 11. For now, let's move on to the final element of this hierarchy superstructure framework. Transcendence. The key tenet that separates this model of recovery from other biopsychosocial spiritual models is the addition of yet another domain above the spiritual, at the very top of the pyramid, called Transcendence. I learned this from business partner, podcast co-host, and friend Chris Scott, founder of Fit Recovery. Transcendence is the act of rising above something to a superior state. Traditional addiction dogma teaches that addiction is a lifelong, incurable disease that can be arrested but never transcended. Chris and I both believe that addiction can be transcended, meaning you recover completely. You recover in such a powerful way biologically, psychologically, socially, environmentally, and spiritually that you actually quote-unquote outgrow addiction and become a new person, a new identity, and the type of person that would never make choices that could lead to becoming re-addicted. Ultimately, it's an evolution of mind, body, spirit that is powerful and permanent. We know this is possible because we've both accomplished it ourselves. This is not to say that it's an easy, quick process that has a proven method for everyone. And this is not to say that potentially every person is likely to transcend their addiction. It is to say, however, that with hard work, persistence, resilience, consistency, and patience, it is entirely possible for the majority of people. One of my main key philosophies is, quote, "There are many paths to recovery," end quote. Depending on your unique situation, personality, beliefs, values, desires, resources, needs, and other variables, the best detox plan and recovery treatment plan for you would be different than the best plan for many others. In Chapter 11, you'll learn how to create and implement your own customized Hierarchy of Opioid Recovery treatment plan. It's actually quite fun and empowering to begin designing your own customized treatment plan. You can also decide to work with a counselor, therapist, or recovery coach and have them help you create a treatment plan if you decide that would be best for you. The choice, of course, is yours. Follow your intuition, and it will guide you to making healthy and empowering decisions for your recovery and life. In my case, I was in recovery from addiction for several years before I transcended addiction completely. Even years after quitting, there were times now and again where I would think about using opioids, benzos, or even other drugs. Usually, it was when I was in physical proximity to a friend that had a prescription for drugs in their possession. Other times, it was environmental cues, such as driving past the McDonald's that I used to meet my dealer at to purchase a gram or a half gram of black tar heroin. However, with continued effort in optimizing my health, mindset, relationships, and other important areas of life, along with my continued research into addiction and recovery, along the timeline somewhere, I fully transcended addiction. I rose so high above it that I looked down and it was this tiny, insignificant little ant, and I raised my foot up high and forced it crushing downward until I totally smashed and obliterated the little ant. Many others have risen so high above and transcended addiction that they simply outgrow it and are no longer in recovery, but fully recovered. But to become recovered, you really have to know yourself and know the enemy, opioid addiction. If you don't even know one of these, it's impossible to recover and then transcend addiction and become recovered. If you know both of these like the back of your hand, you should be well on your way to beginning the war and prevailing like a true warrior. In Chapter 9, you're going to learn about yourself and how to upgrade your mindset and more to prepare you for the war ahead. But before we do that, let's learn as much as we can about the enemy, aka the phenomenon of opioid addiction. Over the years, I've developed a framework for viewing opioid addiction and the obstacles to opioid recovery that has helped countless people to quit opioids successfully. Thus far, we've really just scratched the surface of opioid addiction. But now it's time to deep dive into the physical and psychological aspects of this disorder. So let's move on to this exciting mental model I've developed for knowing the enemy, which I call the top 7 obstacles of opioid recovery and the 5 phases of opioid recovery.